Hey guys, it's Elise and welcome back to my Cupcake Addiction. Today I'm going to show you guys how to make an inside out cake because you guys have been requesting it since the day the movie came out. Today we're going to be making an inside out cake that's got details on the inside, details on the outside, and it's topped with my favorite character, Bing Bong. The things that you're going to need to recreate this amazing inside out cake: I've got a double batch of my buttercream frosting. I've also got a cake board. I'm using a really bright color here. I've got sanding sugar in all the colors of the main characters. So I've got red, blue, green, purple, and yellow. I'm going to leave details on the My Cupcake Addiction website of everything that I've used, from the buttercream recipe to how to create your own sanding sugar and the cake mix quantities that I've used today. So check that out if you're going to recreate this cake. You're also going to need a little bit of melted white chocolate. For my memory storage containers, I'm using plastic test tubes today, and you will need 10 of those in total. I've got a small circle cutter and a little bit of tape. I've pre-baked my cake in 5 different colors, so I've gone with the same colors as my sanding sugar and the same colors of my characters. And once again, I'll leave details of what I've done here on that blog post. I've also got a template that you'll need to print out, which I will link to down below, and a little bit of wax paper. Let's get started. So first step here is to carve up our cake layers. So to carve, I'm just going to take a serrated edge knife or a bread knife, and I'm just going to go by eye here, but if you have a cake leveler, you could definitely use one of those. And I'm going to trim off all of the cooked outside edge of the cake. You want all of these cake layers to be as level as possible and nice and flat and roughly the same height, because that's going to give you a really nice even look inside the cake when you cut it. You want to cut the top, and you also want to cut the very, very bottom off. If you don't cut the bottom off the cake, what you end up with is a small brown line in between each of your layers when you cut, and we don't want that in our beautiful rainbow cake. It's not such a big deal if you've got these outside edges on the cake. You may want to trim them off, but you want to make sure that you're getting rid of any of this edging so you've got a really nice, neat, solid block of color inside your cake. That's going to be my first piece, and I'm going to use that as a guide so that all of the rest of my cake layers are the same height. So I'm kind of going to measure them up beside each other. So when all of your cakes are looking something like this, we are going to move into the frosting phase. So I'm going to go straight on my board here, and I'm going to use a little bit of buttercream just to attach the cake to the bottom. So just sort of smear it on. On goes my purple layer. And then I'm going to frost. So when I frost in between rainbow cake layers, I like to really press a small amount of frosting in initially so that I kind of capture all of those crumbs that are colored, and then we'll go around and put just sort of a nicer, neater coat on top. Try and get your frosting all the way to the outside edges. Once you've got kind of your messy coat of white frosting, you can come back in and put just a little bit of a thicker coat or a clean coat. Beautiful. Next up, I'm going to put my blue layer for sadness. I just like the way purple and blue look together. And we're going to repeat that process all the way up. After blue is going to be green, then yellow, then red. With your cake now completely stacked, and you can see how nice and tall that is, now I'm going to cut off the side edges, and I'm doing this now so that they're all nice and even, and I'm not trying to match up the different sides and shapes along the way. You'll notice I balance my hand on the top of the cake. That's just to make sure that everything's holding together nicely and that my cake doesn't topple, and also that I'm not sort of sliding those layers around as I put pressure on the sides. Whenever I make a rainbow layer cake, this is my favorite part. When you start to cut in on those kind of little crispy cooked edges and you see that beautiful display of color inside. Now that we've exposed all of our beautiful colors, it's time to cover them up again with another crumb coat. So once again, this is a really, really thin coat, back and forward with the spatula, and this is just designed to capture all of those crumbs. We're going to set this coat because we want the outer coat of buttercream to be really nice and just plain white. Once the outside edges of your cake are all frosted, you can add a nice thin little coat to the top. Perfect. It's ready to go off into the fridge. Carry this one carefully. There's a fair bit of weight in it. The cake's in the fridge, but we don't get to have a break just yet. We're going to get our little decorations finalized and ready. So for my Bing Bong, he's got his big nose and he's kind of got relatively small feet. So I'm going to make a small white chocolate disc to sort of stand him on so that I've got a bit more balance when I move this cake. So for my disc, I'm just going to take a little bit of white chocolate and place it in as neat a circle as I can on my baking paper. Give it a couple of taps on the bench, and then you can place your Bing Bong right in the middle and let him dry. Beautiful. Bing Bong can sit off to the side. For our gumballs, I'm going to take 2 test tubes and we're going to join them together just using a bit of tape, but I'm also going to show you how to make sure that tape doesn't touch the cake. So you want to take your gumballs, and I decided to have one of each of my colored gumballs at the top because that's going to go in the relevant section for the character. So 1 purple, 1 red, 1 green, 1 yellow, and this one has to have a blue at the top. I'm going to roll those in. And these are the memories. So I prefer to have kind of more yellow ones because they're the happy memories. Ollie's favorite character was disgust, so he's requested lots of green ones. All right, now you want to take them and just join them together. And I found this easiest to do on the bench because I want a really, really nice seamless join. So on goes my little piece of tape. And then I'm just going to roll them and sort of stick the tape on at the same time. That stops you getting any wrinkles or creases. There's your little memory tube. We've got 5 of those in total. So you will need to repeat that 4 more times so that you've got all of your memories in their little memory storage pods ready to go. Now that I've got a nicely set little coat of buttercream, you can hear it, it's time to put on our second coat. So I'm really just going to slather this on. You can be a perfectionist here, but there is no need because we're going to be covering this very shortly. Make it relatively smooth, but don't spend hours getting it absolutely perfect. Once you're happy that you've got your frosting on relatively neat, I'm going to take a ruler and just use that to sort of lightly smooth it back. Don't smooth too hard here because you don't want to expose any holes in that frosting. And so long as it's relatively even, it's not going to matter if it's not absolutely perfect. And then come and scrape back the top. The edges you can spend just a little bit of time on, just getting them as neat and as even as you can. But once again, these don't have to be super sharp. Because I know this is not my final coat, I'm not going to spend all day on it. And once you've got that frosting on and it's reasonably smooth, you want to get moving relatively quickly here because that buttercream is going to start to form a crust and your sugar won't stick to it once it does. So I've got my little template that I'm going to link to down below and I've cut out just one of the triangles. I've also printed it on A4 and I've made sure to leave a little bit of extra room when I've cut because I've got quite a large cake and I want it to come all the way to the edges of the cake. So I'm going to place that down on the top of the center of my cake so that it's just overlapping on the edges. And then I'm going to take some sanding sugar and not too much here because I want it to kind of coat, but I don't want it to go everywhere. Sanding sugar is a nightmare for cleaning. Little handfuls, and then I'm just using my finger just to smooth it on so it's sticking into that buttercream and holding down these edges so that I don't get sanding sugar underneath where it's not supposed to go on the top. Once you're happy that you've got a nice coating, I'm going to sweep back any excess of that sanding sugar on the paper so it doesn't drop down into my nice clean bits. Then we can lift that paper off. Perfect. So when you lift that up, you should have a nice little neat triangle with really, really nice neat edges. For the sides, we're going to take just a regular piece of paper. I'm not going to cut it because I know that that piece is going to be perfectly straight. And I'm going to line up that side with the edge of the top of that triangle. So up the side, just pressing in with your sanding sugar. As your buttercream starts to crush, you're going to notice you'll need to press just a little bit firmer. And if you are taking a little bit longer than you'd like, you can just rough up the buttercream in the rest of the cake with that spatula to kind of refresh it on the cake a little bit. And removing that paper. So you've got a nice neat line there, and then we'll repeat on the other side. Now my frosting is starting to crust, so I'm just very, very gently just roughing it up just on the sides and also on the top. Now on to color number 2. So you should just be able to take your little wheel, match it up against color number 1 at the same center point. And then on goes our second color. I actually did find that it's easier with your colors to put them straight down on the paper and then brush them into the frosting rather than putting them on the frosting and then pushing them out to the paper because they tend to sneak underneath. Beautiful. Now, because we've done a bit of roughing up, you can just use your fingers just to smooth out that top section so it's still nice and level. One line joined up and then the other side. And once again, you'll see that I'm bringing that sugar over the paper and then pressing it sort of forward onto the frosting. I found that's the neatest way to keep our edges. So by using that template, what you end up with is a perfectly even 5-way division in the top of that cake. And as you lay your last little triangle down, your template should perfectly match up with the space that's left. Because it's not 100% perfect, we've had to rough up that frosting a little bit. I'm going to take a piece of blank paper, rest it on the outside, and then use the palm of my hand to rub up and down. That is just going to smooth off that outer edge. I'm going to do that all the way around the cake. It's going to smooth it off and it's also going to kind of make our joins a little bit less noticeable. Now that you've got your beautiful neat cake, we're going to take our little circle cutter and we're going to make it kind of not so neat again, but there's a method to my madness. So I'm going to come down here on the join between 2 colors. I'm just going to come in and really I just want to make an indent. So I'm only coming into about halfway on the circle cutter and I'm going to slide that right the way down the cake. Just pat down your little edges there so that you're kind of neatening them up a little bit. Look, at this point, I just want to hold up my tube and just make sure that it's going to fit in there nicely. Perfect. I couldn't ask for better. So now I'm going to repeat that little slicing process 5 times for each of the joins. Once all of your little sides are gouged, I mentioned that we have some tape on the sides of our little memory tubes or our little test tubes. We don't want that tape touching the cake. I'm going to take some white chocolate and a paintbrush, and I'm just going to gently paint over a half of the back of the tape on the test tube. With my test tubes ready, I'm going to take a knife and a little bit of buttercream frosting, and you might need to give it just a little bit of a stir up to make sure it's not crusted on top or too dry. And I'm going to run buttercream frosting along the inside edge, being very careful not to let it get up on the outside where my sanding sugar is. This is forming a sticky glue that's going to hold our test tube in place because we don't want that falling off before we get to the party. I haven't brought it all the way to the top, and I also haven't brought it all the way out to the outside edges because I don't want any white to kind of spill out when my test tube goes in. I'm going to choose my tubes with the color of the character relatively close to the color of that character's section. Straight in immediately after you've done that frosting, so we don't allow that buttercream any time to crust. With my test tube in place, now I'm just going to sort of push that frosting to fully encompass the test tube and make sure that it's kind of joined on the sides. Moving on to our next one, and once again we want to do this 5 times. I am absolutely in love with this cake. So I'm going to adjust Bing Bong how I want him to look on the cake. We've got our white chocolate base, which once again protects our non-edible parts from going onto our edible parts, but he won't stick to that sanding sugar. So we need to just expose a bit of that buttercream so that we've got something we can stick down our Bing Bong to. And then I'm going to take a generous little blob of white chocolate, and we're just going to place that in the middle without spilling any on our perfectly beautiful sanding sugared top. And then down goes Bing Bong. Finished! I am so in love with this cake. It could be one of the best things I've ever made. What do you guys think? Let me know down below. With the rainbow cake inside, the rainbow on the outside, the rainbow of gumballs. It's pretty much everything I love, and I loved the movie Inside Out. So for me, this is the ultimate tribute. If you know an Inside Out fan or a gumball fan or a rainbow fan, make sure you share this video with them. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do for 2 new videos every week. And as always guys, thanks very much for watching.